ETE conference. So several people here first years? Very good. How many of you are presenting this year? Excellent. And who's presenting next year? No? No, just kind of curious. I was on the ETE committee for many years, and it's always good to get out there and encourage participation. One way to get a contribute badge is to present at ETE. It's a great opportunity locally to do a presentation for promotion as well. So it's rather than trying to go to a conference, professional development, I'm aviation, aerospace studies, engineering, different areas, but it gives you a chance to do something with just teaching excellence. So it's a nice, easier way to be here close to home.
Not that this man needs any introduction, but as the moderator, let me introduce Professor Baron Wesemann, the global champion of empowering teaching. He needs no introduction practically, but 27 years as a military pilot and instructor, and now at USU, and has been here for quite a few
11 years.
11 years now, and looking forward to learning about the power of yet.
The power of yet. So background for me is I was researching some ideas this year and talking about, what can we do to help people understand that the grades are not the only thing that they learn. And I came up with a wonderful book that I listen to on audio as I travel, and it talks about a growth mindset. Who has heard of the concept of mindset before? Okay, hopefully this is an area where you can help with the conversation a little bit. But I need to tell you about my dream. I was probably 6 or 7 years old. I'd lie on the cool grass on a warm summer day, looking at the clouds floating by, the birds soaring high, and all the airplanes flying into Salt Lake International Airport with giant red W's for Wesemann, I thought, right? For Western Airlines. But here I am thinking, the son of a single-parent immigrant mother, what opportunity do I have? And with that fixed mindset, I had no hope, I had no dream. It was just something that I thought about and never knew how to get there. So today I want to talk a little bit about this opportunity to understand that our abilities to find success to become the world heavyweight champion, okay, not heavyweight, the world champion of ETE, how do you get there, right? It's not just something that you're born with. It's not a talent. It's not an innate ability that you have. But how you think about this is, well, I'm not a pilot yet. I'm not a college graduate yet. I don't understand calculus yet. It's that idea that just because you're not there yet doesn't mean that you can't enjoy that journey and learn from that. So we're going to talk about this power, this idea, how it shifts your ability to think where I am, right? I don't have those skills yet. So today we're going to talk about, this is my official professor slide, I want you to think beyond the grade of what are those lessons we teach them that are not in the curriculum. There was a presentation a few years ago right here where it says, what is the hidden curriculum? What are you teaching your students that they're not being graded and evaluated on? Who here teaches connections? Anybody teach connections? It's a first-year experience class where they learn about the how to study skills. Guess what? The first day of class, when one of my professors comes in and shuts the door and tells all the airline transport pilot students, the captain has just closed the door, we are pushing back from the gate, time to start class. And 3 people come up and the door is locked and they're knocking on the door. What is he teaching them? Punctuality is more than just being to class on time. If you are 2 minutes late on takeoff and have to have a different slot time with an airline, that could cost your airline hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you sit because you're late waiting and the engines are running, that's tens of thousands of dollars of fuel, right? That is the hidden curriculum that we're teaching. So we're going to talk about the growth mindset, fixed mindset, and go over some of those traits. And I want you to think about what is your ability as an instructor to help teach those to students. You may not explicitly have it in your syllabus. You may not just put it down on paper, but you're going to teach those by your example and by how you teach your class. And I want to talk about failure. How do we see failure? This individual here was cut from his high school varsity team. He was not recruited by the top 3 colleges that he wanted to go to. And he was not even drafted in the first rounds of the NBA. Anybody know who this might be? Don't say it out loud. Raise your hands if you know who this may be. Okay. He says, and this is Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Michael Jordan said in one of his interviews, when they said, "You're unbelievable, you're the greatest basketball player of all times. Tell me about that." And he says, "Well, you just mentioned the successes." But he says, "For me to become the greatest basketball player,
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life."
does it make him a failure? No. We all fail. It's okay. What is not okay is that when you fail, you stay down. And winners who fail and get up, fail and get up, fail and get up. You always get up. That is a winner.
So that is what it means to succeed. Who's heard that speech, that presentation before, right? Tiger Woods does a similar statement. There's a lot of great athletes, musicians, pioneers in aviation who say the same thing, right? I've learned that I can work through failure. Failure is on my way to success. But is that a mindset that we grow up with when we're kids at home? Is that a mindset we understand? And so how do we take the limitations of us as a youth when we're growing up to understand that is not what it means? When I was in 7th grade, I decided to run for student government. Shy little awkward kid, believe it or not. And I lost in a big way. And I was traumatized. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I did not run again until my senior year when I ran for student council and was elected student council president. But it took 5 years for me to overcome that. Well, I guess I'm just not popular. I guess I'm just not able. That's not what I'm going to do, right? And so we as individuals, as humans, need to understand that. So mindset, this is the book that I listened to, Carol Dweck, 2007 it came out. And it's interesting when you read a book like this, it sounds familiar to you, right? Have you done that where you're reading a book or listening to a book and go, wow, this makes sense to me. This is something I understand. And she talks about this idea of mindset. So who can give me a definition of mindset? What is a mindset? What do you think it is?
Mental state of your image.
Okay. It's a self-reflection, right? How you view yourself. What else? I love that. The rose-colored glasses, right? How do you view the world? How do you view yourself in that world, right? That mindset is, I'm looking out there to see the world. Now, in general terms for today's presentation, I'm going to talk about the two that she mentioned in her book. One is a fixed mindset, right? That fixed mindset, well, I failed the election, guess what? I'm not going to be a student leader. I'm not going to do that in school, right? I become that mindset, right? So that's a fixed mindset. I believe that that's where I am. I'm not good at basketball. I'm not a basketball player, right? I can't play this musical instrument. I must not be a musician. So we set ourselves up for that mindset based upon that framework that we have, that view of ourselves and how we view the world around us, and say, well, I'm not good at baseball, so I'm not going to do baseball. I can't play this instrument, so I'm not going to do it. My first instrument was a violin at 5th grade, and I broke the strings, the case, and the bridge in the first week. And rather than give up on music, my teacher goes, have you looked at a brass instrument? So next thing you know, she gave me this trumpet. I couldn't make the sound, so she goes, you have baritone lips. I go, what's a baritone? It's a low brass instrument, and the rest is history. I became a tuba player. I still play in tuba Christmas every year. Come see us here in Cache Valley. There were 36 tubas. I went down to Salt Lake. There was 103 tubas in Trolley Square. But because the teacher didn't have a fixed mindset and helped me overcome that fear of just not being able to do that. Now, what would be the opposite of that is a growth mindset. So when you hear the word growth mindset, what do you think a growth mindset is? What is a growth mindset? This is not graded, by the way.
You're flexible.
Okay.
Everything's a learning experience instead of a set experience.
I love it. And I'm speaking to a bunch of educators, professionals who obviously believe that, or you wouldn't be here, right? Who has experienced some setbacks in your life, some trials, some challenges that you had to overcome? Every one of us, right? So we believe that we can develop those abilities, we can develop that intelligence and those skills whether it's a tactical skill like music or sports, or whether it's an intellectual skill like teaching and speaking. I obviously overcame that timidness that I had in 7th grade. And I overcame that fear of speaking in public, right? So that is where we do it. That framework, and I like how Major Henry actually said, it's that view, it's that perspective you have, right? So once you perceive that I can learn this, that challenge is an opportunity for me. So let's delve into this a little bit more. Again, Carol Dweck wrote this wonderful book, and this was one person who wrote about her book. She said, it's transformative insights into redefining success. Do we think success is just the destination, that I make the Olympics, that I earn a gold medal that you wear around your neck or a belt that you wear, right? No, it's redefining success as lifelong resilience. And the way they said about her book, it supercharges self-improvement. And I like that, because I think it's an opportunity for us to realize that no matter where we are, sometimes we need that little bit of motivation to step it up, right? Right before a big game, you psych yourself up. You're getting ready for a big test. You cram. You don't go to the lake. You decide, I'm going to stay here and work. So that's what this book did for me, is it gave me an opportunity to really think about that. So this, again, to reemphasize the fixed mindset definition is, you believe that that's it. I'm either good at math or I'm not. I either am going to be a musician or I'm not. It's who I am, and define yourself. And so a lot of times that perspective of ourselves limits what we can do. And it limits our ability to think that we can grow into something else. How about our students? Let's have a 2-minute discussion. What about our students? What traits or mindsets do they bring with them when they come to college?
They bring different experience levels.
Yeah, different experience levels. Yeah. My first year at a conference, I was sitting here, it was about 2 or 3 years after I was here, and they said, hey, we're starting this new thing called Aggie for Scholars. We have these first-generation students. And they asked the question, how many of you are the first ones in your family to go to college and graduate? If I ask that question, how many of you are first-generation college students in this room? Anybody? Okay, yeah. And I realized I am. None of my parents' ancestors who came over from Prussia and Germany ever went to college and graduated. I go, I'm a first scholar. First-generation college student. And as I realized, that shifted my mindset about, so what did it take for me to be able to go for it? What else do our students bring with them?
That they're not good at science or math.
Right. Yeah, because why? They struggled in high school in a class, and they go, well, I'm not good at math. You know, I can't get into math, so that means I can't do those jobs, right? What else?
Some of them are used to consistent achievement in high school.
Yeah, just the opposite, where they go, hey, you know what, you're the star football player, you know, you're the MVP, and everybody sees you and identifies you as that. And all of a sudden you go, but I want to go be an English teacher. And what do they say? You're going to college in football, right? You have a scholarship. You get identified because of a talent, and they have that expectation. Or they say, man, you're 6'5". You're a basketball player, right? And you go, I got 2 left feet. No, but you're going to go on and play basketball. So in other words, we look at our physical characteristics often, right, in high school. You know, what do we do in high school? You were voted the most outgoing. You know, you were voted the best looking. You're voted the most likely to succeed in college, right? Do you guys still do that in colleges, or in high school yearbooks? My sons didn't anymore, but in mine, that was a big deal. They had 3 pages of most likely to do this, right? And I didn't win any of the popularity contests, which is kind of interesting, but there you go. Okay, so in other words, we label each other. Do we do that in college and professions still, right? We do that. I got a label. I'm going to wear it proudly. You know, but in all seriousness, this is what our students bring here. And we recognize the success. Do we recognize how many hours that student put in the swimming pool before and after school? 4 hours a day for 4 years just to barely make the team that went to state, right? We often don't see the hours that they put in learning to play the violin or the tuba. We don't recognize that. We only recognize the final achievement. And that's part of that fixed mindset that they come here with, right? And then what happens? They want to avoid anything where they won't see that success. I actually see students looking on, oh, who else is running in that 5K Saturday? Well, I'm not going to win, so I'm not going to go. You know, they now set themselves up that they will only participate in events where they can be successful. That's a fixed mindset. So how do we change that mindset for these students? And again, that's the focus on grades. I'm going to take a class because it's an easy A. I'm going to go to rate my professor, easy A, not a lot of work. I can get an A in that class. Why? Because that's how they measure success. So that's what our students bring. Anything else that is not on the list? I mean, we could have additional items. Uncertainty? Yeah. They don't know. Sometimes they come to college, hey, what do you want to do here? I have no idea. Yeah.
Limitations.
Yeah.
For example, our profession is probably only 25% female, so I guess female would say, well, I can't do that because I'm a minority. And I'm like, no, you can and you should. And
For the group, what do you teach for the group so they know your profession? Industrial hygiene. Aviation, everybody know what female percentage pilots are today? 5%. Our aviation program, we're 14%. We're doing pretty well. Maintenance in females? 2%. Used to be 1.4 10 years ago. Yeah, so again, those limitations that we place upon ourselves, those societal expectations, right? So let's talk about some things here. There's a couple points in the book that I really liked, and I'm just going to point out 3 chapters because there's 12. One of them, she talks about talents. When I say talent, what do you guys think of when I say talent? Something you're good at, right? What do we normally think of when we talk about talents, though? Do we say someone has a talent in baking bread? We say what? Singing, music, sports, right? Pardon me? Intelligence, like, oh yeah, you know, of course you're smart. Your parents are both college graduates, right? We label folks into these buckets, right? We say this is what talent is, which basically is saying that you're born with it, right? Nature versus nurture, we talked about that, right? So can you develop? Well, obviously the answer is yes. The answer is yes, you can develop, yes, you can be engaged, and that's why it's important that we have that mindset. How do you teach that to your students, though, right? And this is something interesting in the book. It points out in the Western Hemisphere, what do we highlight? Gold medals, Super Bowls, you know, valedictorians. There's a lot of elements that we teach our youth growing up before they ever come to college. That what do we emphasize? What do we celebrate? We celebrate achievement and success, and quite often individual success. There's a time and place for that. That's not my presentation today, but in a lot of Eastern cultures, they emphasize the process. They emphasize the team. They emphasize the journey, the learning, as being just as valuable. And that's why I said at the very beginning, you need to enjoy the journey so that the journey in and of itself is something to be honored and recognized as valuable, not just the destination. And that's what you heard this morning's presentation, right? The feedback and learning is just as valuable. Now, I must say in the STEM fields, I don't want to put it off to somebody else to evaluate those students. I don't want the first time they feel stress and anxiety to be in an airplane where they lose an engine with 250 passengers behind them in the weather. I want to give them some stress. So I'm okay with a little bit of intensity in college, right? So we want to be able to help that. So, but you talked about vulnerability. We talked about those things that students will avoid a class because it's too hard or avoid something. I remember listening to a podcast last summer where it was talking about music, and they showed these senior citizens learning music, and none of them were very good. None of them were awful. And they said, sometimes you're not playing the music because you want to be talented in the eyes of the world. You just enjoy it. So even though it doesn't sound like you're a virtuoso, guess what? It's okay because you enjoy it. How do we teach our students to take a class because they enjoy it? Even though they may not get an A, even though they may not be the best in the class, but still find a way to be involved. The second thing she talked about is how do we prove competence? This is a good question. Who teaches in the STEM career fields, or would you say technical career? What are you teaching? Animal science. How important is it that they have certain levels of competence, even in the early classes, for your careers? What's an example of a class that you teach that you say that is something where they've got standards that they have to learn?
I'm a graduate student, so I just teach a lab, but it's a feeds and feeding lab, so they have to know some basic principles of how animals differ from each other, how different species differ from each other. That's something that they would be taught in the animal science class.
Yeah. And different feeds for different ages and stages of animals, right? It's a science as much as an art as well, right? And so when we look at our ability to teach our students, we have to let them know that, there has to be certain objectives that they have to meet. There's certain standards we have to teach. The ability to go and do that. And so that fixed mindset is, everything you're doing is for that grade. Everything you're doing is just to get an A. Whereas the growth mindset says, no, it's that intrinsic motivation that I'm doing it because I'm learning. I'm doing it because I'm preparing myself for that opportunity to go into that career field. Right? That's the growth mindset we need to have. And so we got to look at that long-term view. We got to look at that ability to think it's not just 1 year of this class or this major over a couple of years or even graduation. I'm preparing for career in my life. The other one is, this is one I'm going to emphasize too, is how do you look at those challenges where we don't succeed? Right? Where we have an opportunity where we failed at something. You failed on that assignment. A graduate student of mine was going through, and this individual had a paper, and I sent the paper back and said, I will not accept this paper, APA format, and I just went over there. And this individual was really kind of traumatized. And at the end of the semester, when he did the feedback, he said, Professor Barrett, I'll let you know, that's the first time I've ever failed a paper in college. And going through this master's program, I really started to wonder, am I really cut out to do this? By the way, we hired him as an instructor. He's an adjunct for us now teaching. But he came and said, I thank you for telling me that I still could do it and having that motivation to go there. So he looked at it as an opportunity to learn. He goes, but I never knew APA format. I didn't understand it. And rather than just letting it slide, you said, no, this is not the standard you need. And so there's an example where I was able to help and work him. But so often, when we have that fear of failure, we want to sabotage ourselves because they'd rather fail than be embarrassed, or they'd rather quit. And so those behaviors are there. So here are some challenges and misconceptions that her book brings up. So is growth mindset just trying hard? Is that good enough just to try hard? Yeah, no, the effort has to result in progress, has to result in learning. And we can go into a lot of details about how we assess that, but it's not just trying hard, it's a balanced approach. There's several famous football coaches, and there's like 100 quotes, but one that I liked was, if everybody on the team just does 1% better today, it doesn't matter if we win or lose, we're learning as a team. Eventually, if everybody does 1% better, the scoreboard will take care of itself, right? And that's a mindset to have, right? You don't have huge progress every time, but 1% better is moving in the right direction. Does giving compliments help the mindset? This is a question, not rhetorical. Yeah.
I think verbal affirmation can help that self-image.
Okay.
It has to be genuine, and it has to be given at the right opportunity. If it's given too much, then maybe you see it as being insincere.
Okay. Very good. I like that. Here and then here. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically I was going to say a similar thing. Just, it depends on the situation. Like you're saying, if you always give compliments and it's always amazing, then it is the same as never giving a compliment.
If especially if it's just generic, oh, you're so smart. You did great on that test. You're so smart. What does that really tell you, right? One more? Yeah. So the key is how you do it. It's genuine, and you say, you know what? You aced that test. You must have studied hard and prepared and put the time and effort in to see that success, right? You need to emphasize the work and effort, not just the fact that, oh, you're smart. Because it can force this fixed mindset that, well, if I'm good on a test, it means I'm smart. And if I didn't do good on the test, it means I'm dumb, right? And you can label students in a very bad way. So how does one separate that effort from talent, though? How do you do that? Anybody play sport? Was anybody second place to the guy who swam was breaking the school record, and no matter how hard I worked, I could never catch him? I was 20 seconds behind him. And for swimming, that's a lot. I shaved my head, my whole body. I dropped 8 seconds, but it wasn't enough. So what do you do in that set? I'm not going to win first place, except for the one time. This is terrible. We're swimming against a team that's not very good, so we pulled all our events out of a hat. Is that really bad? And so the guy that was the 500, the distance swimmer, he got the backstroke, which he's not very good at. And I went in there, and I was blessed from above. I got the 500. And that was the only time I ever got the gun, which is the last lap, and I won the race. One time in my entire career. But that's the thing, though, is how do you separate that? And sometimes you don't, right? I think talent opens the door. Talent maybe gives you the confidence to try something that you maybe wouldn't, right? Sometimes you feel like, oh, well, you're a natural. You just have a natural swing for baseball. And that gives you the confidence to at least try and to find out. But they don't realize, like Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, that they didn't just start out like that. They started out when they were young. And they would go to the gym. One thing that Michael Jordan, when he lost that game, he would go back out onto the court. And he would stand where he missed that shot. And he would stand there and shoot that for 100 times. Why? Because he knew that I don't want to not learn from my mistake. What did I not do right? And he would stand there and shoot it until it's muscle memory in there. That's what it takes. But that's not what you see, right? When he slams and they win the NBA championships, you don't see all the hours that they put in. A couple more things. We got to get this mindset that you have talent or you don't. The first time you try something, the second, the third, maybe it's 1,000 times before you learn something. And it just demonstrates that your talent is in your resilience, is in your hard work. Your talent is in your mindset to not give up. That in and of itself is a talent. Okay? But this is one of the hardest things that I see is a lot of folks today, they'll only want to do what they're good at. Whether it's they learned it from gaming or school or whatever, like there's not always a reset button, but if they're winning, they'll play it. The moment they struggle, they quit. And they'll go find something else. They want the easy path. And I challenge you as instructors and professors, don't always just look for that easy path. All right, developing a growth mindset. This is something, and I got a lot of fun pictures learning aviation. Remember, that was my dream. I got a story, so don't get ahead of me. This is me up in a glider. So much fun. So the strategy is you got to reframe that perspective, the glasses, that when you start to struggle and there's a challenge, look for an opportunity to learn, look for an opportunity to be resilient, and look at and accept that challenge. That's what it takes, right? The second thing is the power of yet. I haven't mastered this yet. I haven't passed calculus yet. I haven't graduated college yet. It's that idea that I'm not there yet. But that gives you hope, right? That gives you this idea that it's possible to do that. And so when you look at that, not just the outcome, it's not just the destination, it's that process of what you do to get there. And self-reflection is so important. I wish I had a little more of that this morning, but self-reflection is where you look at your own journey. And I have that assignment in my classes, and I found that if I have no points, very few people do it, but if I give some points, I have 100% participation in that assignment, just saying. But that self-reflection, they tell me, what did you learn from this course? What was the most challenging? What was one of your aha moments? That's some of the best feedback I get that I don't get in the idea survey, which also, if you don't give points, most of them don't do it. But extra credit points works. But the idea is that self-reflection helps me see what they learned. And most of the students in aviation, they want to be there. It's one of the most expensive undergraduate majors, but they give me some of the reflection that is powerful that I don't see. They say, I really struggled with this concept early on, but you helped me get through it, or I redid the assignment, I met with a study group like you told me to, and once I learned it, I understand it, and now I know how to do it. So it's a language shift in your mind, right? I'm not good at this. I can't do math. There's no way I can learn to hit a baseball, right? I can learn how to do this. I can try to figure it out. Not that you have to be good at everything, and we got to determine sometimes it's okay to be average, slightly above average. That's okay too, right? You can't be good at everything you do. So the story of Barron, this is my little story. Remember I sat on that grass, lying down, trying to figure it out. When I joined Civil Air Patrol in 1981, I tell the youth, 44 years ago, I was you. I saw my vision. I joined an organization that gave me a future opportunity. I shaved my head for swimming. That's not because of Civil Air Patrol. But you saw over here where I got to go to the Air Force Academy. I earned my jump wings. I got my glider soaring solo wings and powered flight wings. My whole life changed because of that one organization that gave me a vision of what I can do. So I'm living the dream. There I am, 1985, got a solo airplane for the first time. What airplane is this right here? Any guesses? CF-16. I was inverted up there taking a picture, and then I got to be a combat rescue pilot. But it all started in pilot training. T-37B, now retired. T-38B, now retired. And they're earning my wings, and I'm retired as well. But I was going through T-37s, and the squadron commander's name was Lieutenant Colonel Bath. My son was going through Vance Air Force Base a couple decades later after me. And there's Lieutenant Colonel Bath. So there's this little opportunity to go through pilot training at T-37. Before you go solo, you got to fly. Left to right, side by side. That's the airplane right there. Student on the left, instructor on the right. And there you sit with the control stick in the middle. And so you got the throttle, and you got to fly. And then you do your pattern, 30 degrees of bank. You see the horizon right there? So here I am sitting up there getting ready to turn. And as I'm looking to the runway, what happens to the control stick? Has everyone been driving down the road with somebody and they look over there and, well, what are you doing? Get back in your lane, right? So 30 degrees of bank is good. 45 is marginal. 60 degrees of bank. Look over there, 60 degrees of bank. What happens to the stall speed? Okay? This is the technical part of today's presentation, okay? Stall speed is when you get buffet and the airplane doesn't want to fly. So 55 knots there, we know we do the final turns at 65 knots, right? So if I go to 60 degrees of bank, what's my stall speed? Higher than my speed I should be flying. So when I was sitting there looking at the runway and looked to the right, I overbanked to an unsafe situation. I failed that check ride. Now, my flight commander, the supervisor, comes up to me and says, well, you're going to go do your elimination ride with Lieutenant Colonel Bath. No one's ever survived the wrath of Bath. That was my pep talk. I don't kid you. That was exactly. I went home that night thinking, what was my dream? To be a pilot, to be in the military? That's it. My life is over. That's all I could think about with that fixed mindset, right? So I went home and I took a toilet plunger and put it on the floor, sat in a swivel chair, trimmed the airplane up, turned my head, let go. Practice that, 30 degrees of bank, right? The next day I go fly with Lieutenant Colonel Bath. And I get up there and I trim it up to 30 degrees of bank. I let go of the stick. I learned back, came back, flew this pattern. We did all the maneuvers, we land, and Lieutenant Colonel Bath goes, so, Lieutenant Wesemann, what happened up there? And I go, sir, I was right at 30 degrees of bank. I was on speed the whole way. I did not overbank. He goes, no. What happened before? You did great. I'm doing something I've never done before. I'm going to reinstate you in the program. Yay! I didn't do that. I'm sitting at attention, you know. And I don't know what he said for the next 10 minutes because I could not believe I survived the wrath of that. I go back to the flight room, and I must have been white because they all said, I'm so sorry that you're washing out of pilot training. And I'm going, no, I passed. The reason I tell you this story is 10 years later, I'm a flight commander in pilot training. And I've got a student, not you, just a student, who is struggling and going through an elimination ride. What kind of pep talk did I give him? Not the fixed mindset pep talk. I gave him a growth, go home and chair fly. This is the big picture ride to see if you have the aptitude to continue training. I want you to focus on A, B, and C. He went and flew a great sortie. When he came back, we gave him the call sign Lazarus because he came back from the dead. So what am I telling you is that you're not born with this innate ability. At some point in your life when you're a young child and you learn to be courageous and do everything, society puts these pressures on you where you start to develop a fixed mindset. Because we encourage you to do what you're good at, right? How can we go back to that innocence of child where you're fearless and want to try everything, right? That's how you learn to ride a bike. That's how you learn to jump off the high dive, right? You had the courage to try so many things. That's what we need to get into, right? Oh, Thomas Edison, famous quote, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I learned 10,000 ways it did not work. He was with the team. It wasn't a one-man show, but he found a team to do it. So we're going to go over this a little bit faster pace. I'm not going to read everything, but here are some fixed mindset traits, right? You believe that they're fixed. You don't see your own flaws. You just want to highlight the positives. You know, these are the traits that you see in others and maybe yourself, right? You don't want to try. You want to stay in your safe spot. And every time someone gives you feedback, that's a personal attack because you're attacking my talent and who I am. You identify with your success, right? I'm a gold medal athlete. And how many gold medal athletes struggle with fame? Right? Because that's how they're identified. And all of a sudden they leave that environment where they're good and they go home to their family or jobs and they struggle because they've lost that identity of being that individual, right? And this is the cool thing in the military. You get to put your name on your airplane, so I kind of like that. So this is that fixed mindset, right? It's not you failed, it's you are a failure. That's what we tell ourselves, right? I failed, I'm a failure. I failed this class, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not going to be a nurse, right? You become your mistakes. You have to overcome that mindset. How do you do that with your students? Fixed mindset is a thief of hope. And once you lose hope, there is no growth mindset. You have got to find a way to always have that idea that you can improve, that you can achieve that. And maybe you won't be a gold medalist like Michael Phelps with 8 gold medals around your neck. Maybe you won't even make the Olympics, but guess what? You can be good at something and find a way. So here's some growth mindset traits, and look at the slides afterwards online. But you embrace those challenges, those opportunities. You look for those things that help you and frame those ideas, right? So you embrace the criticism. You say, okay, help me learn better. What can I do? That's the difference between a critique and criticism, right? We like critiques in the proper way, but criticism, none of us like. We avoid that, right? But look to opportunities to learn. Look for opportunities to see what can I do better. It's that continuous improvement. I'll give you a second here, and I'll build this one a little bit faster. That's the mighty C-130 Hercules, which I got to fly. Resilience, that was what I talked about last year. What is resilience? Ability to bounce back, right? There's a wonderful book called Turbulence, and it's about when you fly an airplane, this is going to be scary. 98% of the time, you're off altitude, off heading, and off airspeed, right? But you're constantly fighting to come back because the wind blows you, the sun is heating the earth, something happens, you're constantly bouncing back to where you need to be. Now, autopilots help you a little bit, right? But you still have to do that. Isn't it our lives? You know, those the one the speaker talked about, life balance is like a ceiling fan or a bicycle and all has to be perfect. No. Right now, you're sacrificing family time with your kids to be here at work and to be here today. You sacrifice time at work to go take care of a loved one or to go on a professional development or to go take care of yourself at the gym, right? Life is never in balance. There's always something out of balance, but we got to prioritize those things. Or another way to look at it, you're sacrificing one thing for another. You have some trade-offs. But you embrace that lifelong learning. I'll just build this real quick here. Curious, I love that, right? Someone who has a growth mindset is looking beyond the grade, beyond the textbook. How many of you have a class where you have optional readings? How often do they do the optional readings? They're too busy. Their students are too busy. But every once in a while, you'll find someone has that curiosity. So I found a way to be able to do that is I say, hey, by the way, here's an optional book, but there's a great chapter in here. Just read that one chapter because it talks about this. Next thing you know, they're reading the whole book, right? That curiosity factor, you can embrace that. But this is the mindset, and again, my name on another airplane, the T6. But this positive self-talk is not the fake self-esteem movement, right? I'm not talking about I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Stuart Smalley, right? I'm dating myself with Saturday Night Live, but when it was good. But the idea is you've got to find a way, though, so that you think that positivity. That's what I'm talking about. All right, students, this is the biggest challenge that I want to talk about today, and this is your homework to think about, right? How do you view your students? As individuals, as humans, as folks with their background, and how do you relate to a class? Who teaches a big class? I have 225 students in a room. How can I even remember their names, right? In a big auditorium. How do you do that? Think, pair, share, online discussions, right? But you got to find a way to reach them, right? We want to help them develop growth mindsets. So create assignments. Let them redo an assignment. If they don't like their paper grade, they can redo it for half the points that they lost. So instead of getting a C, they can bring it to a B. Find out ways to do that. This morning you heard some strategies as well. They can negotiate options. I looked at one class, they could do A or B or C, and I'm okay with that. I don't have the ability with that many students everybody have their own individual career paths in my class, but I can do a couple different options. Give them some things they can do. You can record the presentation, or you can do a PowerPoint or a paper or a video. Give them some opportunities. But we want to be able to do that to our students, but this is the most important of our students. Help them understand that failure is not the end, that struggling in your class is not the end. I don't take pride in giving Fs, and I want to see students succeed as every way they can. So look beyond that grade and find ways to reach the students. Now, how many of us know that grades are important? Are they important for scholarships, for job interviews, And to understand mastery, there's a purpose. There's a purpose for them. But realize if you only focus on that one aspect, you've missed 90 other ways to be able to help those students. So this is one thing that I think is so interesting. This is one of my favorite quotes when I was reading this book, and I saw this, I went, this is so true, right? We see our idols, our champions, whether they're musicians or athletes, people that we want to be and aspire to. When I was a kid, Jake Garn, astronaut, pilot, father, state senator, church leader, so many things. I go, how in the world do you do that? I looked at being a shuttle astronaut. A couple of years ago, my boy said, do you see the latest shuttle astronaut? A Navy SEAL, doctor, multilingual. I go, how can you compete with that, right? We don't realize what it takes to get there. Every one of them had a struggle. Guess what? They're ordinary people with extraordinary opportunities. So, this is your bonus slide from Becoming a Learner, Matt Sanders' book. Who's read that book? Who's heard of the book? You got to read it. It talks about reframing college is the difference. A student and a learner. A student is that fixed mindset or growth mindset? Fixed, right? Oh, I didn't get a good grade. It's because he's a bad teacher. The assignments were bad. The class was bad, right? You shift the responsibility for somebody else. That's what a student is. It's all about that. Whereas a learner, I'm responsible for my learning. I'm responsible for my education. I'm responsible for what I need to learn. That's the growth mindset. So if you want a little short book about how to become a learner and help your students, I got this in Connections. I actually read his essay when I was a PhD student 7, 8 years ago, and now he wrote this book. It's wonderful. So here's the call to action in the last couple of minutes here. First, you